All right, thanks for those of you that have participated in the polls so far. So we're going to get started and get this show on the road. So I wanted to thank everyone for attending, and good afternoon and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. And today, Tallan and UnifyCloud are going to be presenting on app modernization. So just some quick introductions. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Ryan Clark, and I'm the practice manager for our cloud technologies practice at Tallan. So I work with a lot of our customers, helping them on their digital transformation journey. And a little bit about Tallan. We've been in business for over 30 years, and we're a application and software development firm as well as a technology enablement firm. So a lot of what we're doing is really helping our clients transform with technology. And for 15 of those 30 years or so, we've been a Microsoft partner. So in relation to Microsoft technologies, we've been helping a lot of our customers navigate the Microsoft landscape and really understand how to best utilize those tools and technologies that Microsoft has to offer. And then with me, I have Mark from UnifyCloud.
Hey Ryan, thanks for the introduction. UnifyCloud is founded by a former team of Microsoft Azure engineers, and we've developed some tools to accelerate migration of apps and data to Azure. Our tools were first used 6 or 7 years ago by Microsoft IT, so all of our tools have been stress tested by Microsoft IT and used in their migration to Azure. We're excited to partner with Tallan. They're a UnifyCloud premier partner, and they provide expert services to help implement our tools for app and data modernization and can help you quickly modernize your apps and data to Azure. Back to you, Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Oh. Sorry, had to meet you there for a sec. So before we move on to agenda, for those of you that have just joined, if you look at the webinar platform, there's a sidebar, and there's going to be polls in the polls tab throughout the course of this webinar. We're going to be posting different polls. So if you haven't already, feel free to jump in there and answer the ones that have already been posted, so we could get to know you guys a little bit better too. And then, so just high level on the agenda, kind of some of the topics we're going to be covering today. So defining digital transformation and what does it really mean and what's powering digital transformation. And then what we're going to start to dive into and talk about a little bit is different approaches to modernization. So we're going to talk about this concept of a lift and shift, and then actually modernizing and what that really means and compare the two. And then on top of that, we're going to start to talk about some different scenarios of why you would consider just migrating or lifting and shifting versus modernizing, and different scenarios that may fall into that bucket. Then Mark's going to cover a little bit about the value of platform services. So platform services are primarily what you're going to be using when you talk about quote unquote modernizing your apps. And throughout the course of this, we're going to talk about some different use cases, as well as a app assessment that Tallan and UnifyCloud have put together to kind of help you get a first step in modernizing and digitally transforming. So to kick it off, defining digital transformation and what does that really mean? So every organization is on some sort of journey, and the goal we all have on this journey is to make things better for our customers by catering to the needs and demands through our products and services. So we're seeing a lot of our different clients on different journeys, and there's not just one road to the end. And there's multiple approaches. So some of the stats that you see up here on the page, 91% of business leaders see digital transformation as a way of sparking innovation. So Tallan in particular, more and more, we've been doing hackfests and all sorts of different things with our customers. And most recently, we did a hackfest that the client wanted to call an innovation jam. And it was with a big life insurance company. And they really wanted to find ways to modernize their business in an industry that is traditionally very old school and legacy. So what we did with them was for the Innovation Jam, it started with about 2 months of planning ahead of time. And what they wanted to do was create a handful of groups. So they had, I think it was about 8 groups of 5 people, and they identified people within their organization to participate in the Innovation Jam. And each group was made up of a couple different people. So there was some technical leads within the group, but then there was also people in each group from different lines of business that had very particular use cases and problems that they thought that they could solve with technology. So over the course of 2 months, what we were able to do with this customer is kind of plan out this Innovation Jam and meet with each one of the groups. And by doing that, we were able to, for each group to take their use case, tell them what technologies we think they should be using, and then have them start to build it out. So what we did with them was, by the time the end of the 2 months was done, each group had a minimum viable product, and they were able to they were able to, in the 2 days that we went down there for the Innovation Jam, really start to prove that out. And now what we're seeing from the Innovation Jam, after they presented these ideas back to the business, is that the business is actually taking these seriously and having them as ways to innovate. And we're seeing that they're trying to get funding internally for it and continue conversations with us. So one other thing you see on the slide here is 85% say they must offer digital services to become relevant. And that kind of piggybacks nicely off the Innovation Jam story, because really what this client that we did the Innovation Jam for realized was that in order to become relevant, they needed to offer digital services. Their customers were asking for digital services, and they really wanted to be able to allow their customers to access their life insurance policies and any other information they needed from any device, and make it very easy for them. And I see there's some questions popping in to the polls here, so we're going to save all questions for the end and try and get those all answered for you, but I appreciate those popping in there. So when we talk about digital transformation, what is really driving it? So digital transformation is really powered by apps and data, and every modern day business nowadays is really being called a software company. So today, every company really runs many different applications that are essential for their success. So if you look at the picture here, there's the line of business applications, external facing applications, and internal applications. And then at the core of all that is the data. So the line of business applications, these are your major applications that if anything were to ever happen to them or they were to go down, they're more your mainframe systems, it would have a huge impact to your business. And when you look at the external facing applications and internal facing applications, a lot of those tend to connect into the line of business apps. So every single application in your organization ultimately works with data, consumes data, and in turn, it really generates data. So today, the problem that a lot of our customers are facing is they have this large portfolio of applications that is generating all this data, but what do you do with the data to actually make it valuable to you in terms of driving insights, or in some cases even creating a new line of revenue? So one of the customers that we've been working with for the past couple of years, they're a statistical analysis company, and they do clinical trials for big pharma. So some of the things that they're doing are very interesting. So the CIO that we're working with there, he wanted to find a way to monetize the data that they were collecting from the clinical trials. So what we did for them in their digital transformation journey was we started to take a lot of the apps that they already had on site that was collecting this information and took a cloud first approach in how do we allow our customers to access this data and actually create a new line of revenue for the business. So now what we've created for this customer is a portal that allows their customers to come in and access to the clinical data and actually run clinical trials on a virtual desktop. So now, Pfizer and all these big pharma companies will be coming to them saying, hey, I want to spin up this environment to run some trials and use the data. And they're able to achieve this by utilizing a bunch of different services in Paas and Azure, including app services, Azure DevOps for deployment, as well as API management. and SQL Azure to help expose the data to their customers. So when we look at the bigger picture here, cloud is really modernizing IT. And when you look at IT in general, there's really three core pieces. There's infra, there's apps, and there's data. And a lot of what we're seeing now on the infrastructure side is, there's a lot of customers that have big data centers that they can no longer manage. And that's part of the pain point and part of why we're seeing a lot of customers move to the cloud. So with cloud, you're able to really reduce a lot of the administrative tasks and take away a lot of the roles and duties around server patching, network setup, firewall configuration, and we've seen this with a lot of our customers. There was one in particular. They're a staffing firm and a larger staffing firm, and they had a huge data center that was kind of just falling apart, and they weren't really able to maintain it anymore. So the approach they initially took was to lift and shift their data center to Azure and get it out of their on-prem data center. And from there, they started to look into, oh, how can I modernize and how can I start to look at the apps and data pieces? And so that's really how it's modernizing the infrastructure pieces. You no longer really have to worry about it in a sense. But it's whereas modernizing apps and data is a little bit different. So when you look at platform services, there's a handful of different services that Mark will dive into later and kind of show you. But they really allow you to build more scalable apps and increase your speed to market. So and that's really what you're driving at, is being able to increase your speed to market for your apps and provide new functionality to your customers. And then on the data side, there's a handful of tools within the Azure PaaS suite that allow you to draw greater insights on your data and really create value for that data, similar to what I was talking about with the use case before for the clinical trials company. And then I think one of our customers really put it best. A quote from him is, when we were meeting with them and they were talking about their journey to the cloud, he said, we realized that in order to meet our customers, to meet our customers' needs, we need to transform. And in order to do that, we need to leverage platform services to meet our customers in the cloud. So really at the core of it is, by leveraging cloud services, you're able to meet your customer needs faster and also target your customers even better. So to drill down a little bit deeper into applications and data, since that's really what I was saying is driving digital transformation. Beyond just modernizing IT, cloud is really modernizing our apps and data, which, as I mentioned before, is driving digital transformation. So I wanted to drill in a little deeper. So at a very high level, applications really consist of three layers. The first layer is the application code, and as most of you on this know, that provides the functionality and business logic for your app. Then there's the data that the application consumes and generates, and every application really works with data, and that data could come from many different sources. And then finally, there's the physical or virtualized infrastructure that the application runs on, and such as servers, virtual machines, and networking. And when you're looking at modernizing your applications, you need to look at all these layers individually, because the cloud services and cloud solutions that you're going to build have impacts on all these different layers in different ways, as we mentioned before. So for example, you might decide to keep your data on premise for security and governance reasons, and then move application code and infrastructure to the cloud. And this is a really common hybrid scenario that we've seen before. And like I said in the beginning, there's not just one set way to do digital transformation or move to the cloud. We're seeing a lot of people taking the approach of lifting and shifting infrastructure first from VM to VMs in the cloud, and then kind of coming up with their modernization strategy and plan after. And then we're seeing other companies that are really taking a modernization first approach. And it really depends on your application portfolio and how ready your apps are for platform services, which Mark will start to talk about a little bit later. And additionally, I wanted to mention the cloud offers a lot of tools to help you optimize your infrastructure and enhance the code and functionality. And that's another thing Marc will start to talk about later on in the webinar. So when you look at challenges, there's a ton of challenges with applications, especially in keeping up with the speed of business. So when we think about applications, there's a lot of them. And then on the code level, there's certain things we always need to be thinking about, such as future proofing our code, scalability, and understanding how to provide new features and functionality without having a lot of downtime. So this balance between maintaining and also building new and scaling. And then on the infrastructure side, we need to manage and monitor everything and make sure security is in place so we can control, and also so we can control our costs. And then with data, we need to be mindful of data growth, maintenance costs, and security while accommodating for different data silos. And then lastly, the biggest piece is that kind of ties all these together is application delivery, which is of the highest importance to the business, because the faster you can deliver apps and improve software, the further ahead you'll get of your competition. So the cloud really seeks to address a lot of these challenges through features and automation that allows you to build scalable apps, drive deeper insights and growth, and control infrastructure costs. And ultimately, that will help you increase your speed to market and drive business value. So one of the best examples we have of this at Tallan is there's a customer we've been working with for the past couple of years, and they're a benefits and HR consulting firm. And what we did with them to start was a sort of app assessment where we looked at a handful of apps and kind of decided, should these be migrated as in lifted and shifted, or is there's some value in modernizing some of these? So one of the applications we identified for modernization was this actuarial app that actually ran a ton of financial models. So they had a lot of goals around this app, and some of them were they wanted to improve the scalability to support a growing customer base. So they had a lot of new customers coming in, and going back to keeping up with the speed of business, they needed to be able to keep up with that. So they wanted to allow for quicker and more efficient data processing, and also allow for collaboration within the environment. So in their old environment on-prem where the app sat, one person would have to go in, update their financial model, and that person would have to then pop out, and the next person go in, and it would take them really, really long to really run through all the financial models. So by moving to platform services and utilizing tools like Azure DevOps, App Services, and a handful of others, they were really able to cut back that time. And what they did was they ended up taking a serverless approach that they then wanted to POC. And then from the POC, we were able to kind of prove that this worked. And then they moved on into actually implementing this solution. And as we continue to work with them, we're taking the same approach with their other apps as well. So when you look at applications today versus the future, to touch upon some of the other points I made before, is today on-prem, a lot of applications are built in silos, and what you could really do with them is fairly limited as far as scalability, and then also driving insights on the data that the apps produce is also very limited in on-prem environments. So when you're looking to the future of cloud applications, it's a little bit different, and you probably heard how it's different through some of the stories I went through. But in the future of applications, there's multi-channels, and you're really enabling collaboration throughout the software or app dev development cycle. And many of these you're going to have many platforms and form factors as well to consider, and data growth is being managed, and valuable insights are being made through a lot of the tools that the cloud is offering. And then I think the most important piece is having an elastic infrastructure. So like I was looking at some of the polls, and some of you are in the retail industry, and there's definitely industries that have peak seasons. So being able to be scalable when you need to be is very important, and it's something that the cloud provides. So when you reach your peak season, you could scale up as needed to provide the horsepower that's needed to support your customers and the application. And then when you're out of that, you could scale back down to a sort of baseline infrastructure. So when you're asking if your apps are ready for the cloud, another thing you should probably be asking is my business ready for the cloud in terms of resources and cloud skill sets? So most organizations today are struggling to find technical talent, and your organization might not have enough developer capacity to modernize all your apps and at the same time maintain what you're doing. And the cloud really offers a lot of automation tools that's allowing companies to run leaner and still exceed business expectations. So the stat you see up there is 86% of organizations struggle to find technical talent to build applications. So and that's kind of where partners like Tallan and UnifyCloud could come in. We could help you assess your apps and provide expertise and experience through our own experiences on what the best approach is to do that. Um, and and a lot of people are falling into the situation where you're trying to maintain legacy things because you can't have that go down or else your whole business will. But you want to try and find ways to innovate too. So a lot of what we've been doing at Talon is, acting as an extension of your business to really help you move things forward and not just maintain, but also innovate and push yourself ahead of the competition. So when we work with our customers, we try and make sure that knowledge transfer is really happening at every step along the way. And there's a lot of customers that we work with where it may start with an assessment. Hey, this is great, and we're going to run with it from here. And then there's others that take that information and they say, hey, we understand how to do X, Y, and Z. Can you do A, B, and C? And then some customers, really lean on us heavily for all the implementations. So when you're thinking of how to scale, using partners like Talon and tools from UnifyCloud to help you modernize your apps and really get ahead of the game in innovation, that's a couple approaches we take. So now there's another poll that should be posted. So up on the deck here, you see there's a handful of questions, and these are just typical questions that we're seeing people ask. And if you guys go to the polling section of this, there's a question up there that says, what raises the biggest concerns regarding cloud? So if everyone can just take a second to vote, give it a vote, and we'll go from there. Awesome. Thanks everyone for casting some votes here. Oh, we still got a bunch coming in. So it looks like there's a lot of people that are worried about controlling costs. Um, so a lot of around controlling and monitoring. So the one thing I will touch on with that, as far as controlling costs and monitoring usage, there's a handful of tools within Azure, and they have a whole Azure governance suite of different tools that really help you lock down your environment. And a lot of what we've been doing lately at Talon is there's tons of customers coming to us saying, hey, I want to create a landing zone in Azure, and I want to have a baseline infrastructure, and I want to lock down this environment so I can control all my resources and the costs. So we've been setting up a lot of those for our clients, and it's definitely, I'm not surprised by the polls that that's one of the bigger concerns here. And then, the other one that I guess comes second here is developing strategy and kind of assessing apps, right? So, there's a lot of ways that we could help develop your strategy, and then Mark's going to go into the UnifyCloud tool a little later, and how that is a really quick and easy way to start to assess some of your apps, and then have Talon kind of take the data from that and carry you the rest of the way. One sec. So now to jump into one use case. So there's a customer that we've had at Talon for a while, And I just think they really tie together nicely everything that I've talked about in the beginning of this presentation. So the customer is American Financial Resources, and they're a mortgage bank and a really long-time client of Tallan's. And they're, like I said, a really great example of kind of what I talked about in the first handful of slides. So when AFR came to us, they were really just starting their journey to Azure, but they weren't sure where to begin in developing their line of business application. So to go back to that slide in the very beginning, they were building a line of business application that is cloud first. So they had a handful of other external and internal facing applications that they wanted to connect into this line of business app and really provide value to their business. So we started with AFR by doing a series of workshops, kind of similar to what I kicked off the day with and talking about those innovation jams. And what we did during these workshops for them was we educated them on a lot of the Azure services. And following those workshops, we did a pilot period. And it was pretty clear after that that AFR wanted to leverage app services, application insights, and Visual Studio as a logical next step for them. So from the pilot we did for their line of business application, we were then able to engage our Azure technical architects and user experience experts to build an external facing portal that allows AFR customers and brokers to receive and share information and documentation for the status of their loans. So AFR really wanted to take a painful process of getting a mortgage, and I think most of us have been there, and try and simplify it for their customer. And that's what they were trying to accomplish by modernizing and really creating a cloud first line of business app. So we were able to help AFR leverage Azure App Services and use APIs from other applications that already existed to build a robust self-service loan center for their customers that improve data consistency across all their applications and systems that needed to talk to each other. So when you look at it overall, AFR was able to really digitize the mortgage lending process through this platform, and that allowed them to meet their customers' needs with the use of cloud services. So now their customers could work on their mortgage when they wanted, where they wanted, and from any device that they wanted, taking a very complicated process and ultimately simplifying it for their customers. And the model that AFR took is really a true PaaS model, and allowing Microsoft to manage all their infrastructure so they could focus on innovating their apps and data and driving great insights for their business. So when you take a step back at it now, we're looking at AFR, they're running 70% leaner, but they're closing more loans with fewer staff, which is keeping them extremely competitive. So to go back to the automation of the cloud and kind of how you could run lean and mean with it and focus on app innovation and data insights, that's really what they're doing. And in addition, they're really able to use a lot of the data that they're collecting now to retarget their customers and stay in front of them in ways that matter. And I think that's going to create a tremendous amount of value for them in the future. So that kind of wraps up my section, and I'm going to hand it over to Mark. Before we do, though, there's another poll that should pop up into the box. Another couple polls. So one is, what cloud platforms are you currently using? And what cloud services do you currently use, whether it's IaaS, PaaS, or a mix of both? And then once we get some answers there, Mark will start to dive in. Okay, great. Thanks for those of you that voted. And for those of you who may have joined late, there's a bunch of polls posted now, so feel free to go back and vote on those. But in looking at the information here, it looks like a lot of you are using a mix of both IaaS and PaaS. That's very common. And then a handful of you are already on Azure, which is great. So, Mark, I think you'll have a pretty good audience for your section. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, it's really great to see these the polls and kind of see what's going on with the folks on the call. So yeah, very exciting. So this is just a quick overview of looking at sort of what you're responsible for if you're an on-prem, and I guess about 20% of the folks on the call are still all on-prem. And as you sort of transition to more modern cloud applications. So the first step typically can be lift and shift, where you're taking your VMs from your on-prem environment and moving it to IaaS. Of course, in on-prem, you own the whole stack, right? Everything, physical hardware, software. As you go to IaaS, you've got less responsibility, but you still got to take care of things like, patching the OS and that type of thing. The advantage of going to PaaS is it allows you to focus your resources purely on applications and data, as Ryan was saying. And that's where you can make the most competitive advantage for your company and provide the most value to your customers. So next slide. This just looks at some of the options. This may be a derivative of a Gartner presentation, the 5 R's, where you can look at potentially rehosting, refactoring, re-architecting, and rebuilding, and also retiring can be the 5th R. Typically, lift and shift or moving to IaaS is more of a rehosting. You're not really necessarily making huge changes to the application. You're just getting out of your on-premise environment or your data center and getting to the cloud and starting to move down that journey. Where we see a lot of value from our customers is when they start to refactor. So the key here is you take your existing application code and you scan it quickly and identify what changes you would need to make to be able to run in Azure, either in PaaS or containers. So you get a lot of the benefits of modernization to containers and PaaS without the heavy investment of re-architecting or rebuilding the application. And it really seems to be a sweet spot for a lot of customers. So on the next slide, this just highlights some of the services that are out there. So Azure, depending on how you count it, has over 100 different services, and they're always being updated and released. And part of the value we provide with our tools is we stay current with that. We get early bits from Azure Engineering. We're part of the private preview and public previews, and so our tools support everything that Azure has when it goes GA. But the larger point here is it's much easier to take advantage of these additional PaaS services, such as collecting data from IoT devices and processing that, doing machine learning and big data analytics on that using Azure Data Factory, if you're already in PaaS. So that's why we recommend that you try to get to PaaS as quickly as you can, certainly for your most strategic applications. And working with Tallan, you can put together a strategy for your entire portfolio and what you should do for each application and database in that portfolio. Next, you'll see kind of some of the advantages, and we've sort of talked about this. So I'll let you guys read this. But the main advantages of going to PaaS is, again, your resources can be purely focused on app and data modernization, and it's easier to take advantage of the new services once you're in the PaaS environment. And you can also get better advantages around cost control. I know that was one of the controlling costs is one of the biggest questions that folks have about going to the cloud. And when you're fully PaaS, you're able to take better advantage and better control of the cloud resources. And a lot of that's handled for you automatically, so you don't necessarily need to do anything. Things automatically scale up and scale down as you need them. So what I'd like to do now is just talk about a case study. So this is with a customer, a Fortune 500 customer headquartered out of the South Central region of the US. They're a global real estate management company. They develop, maintain, and manage their real estate properties around the world. Many of you actually may be in some of the facilities that they manage. This was a project to modernize their India APAC data center to PaaS. Because they're in the real estate management business, they see a great opportunity for taking advantage of monitoring, using the cloud to monitor IoT devices, collect the data, and then take action, for example, preventative maintenance on different devices, and also ways to reduce the carbon footprint by managing these environments more effectively. They had 24 legacy applications that they wanted to move to PaaS, and when we scanned it, we realized it was over 6.7 million lines of code. Our friends at Microsoft estimate that it takes about 3 developer days to go through 10,000 lines of code. So to do this manually with one developer would have taken about 5.5 years. We were able to scan the application source code and the databases in about 2.5 hours. So literally, instead of months, you can do this in minutes. And it gives you the opportunity to really focus on the app and databases. So I think if we go to the next slide, you'll see an example. And this was one of the reports we shared with the CIO. And her feedback when she saw this was, this is exactly the information that I'm looking for. So you can see in the first bar chart that Ryan's hovering over there, this is a count of all the code changes if you were to move this set of 10 applications to Paas, VMs, or containers. So you can see obviously there are more changes to go to Paas and containers than VMs, but not as many as you might think. Then you've also got application effort. So the changes that need to be made are different for going to Paas, containers, and VMs. So this just shows you the relative developer effort that it's going to take in hours and days. And I'll show you how we're able to determine that. And then in the center, you see the visualization there, sort of a red-green of the relative effort to go to app services, containers, and VMs. So this is great data that you can take and then, of course, partner with Tallan for additional business insights, for example, which applications are strategic to your business, which ones maybe you're going to retire in 2 years, so maybe you invest less in those now. If we go to the next slide, you'll see a similar type of report for databases. So this was a collection of the customer's databases. And you can see the relative effort to go to SQL MI, SQL VMs, and SQL Azure. And what's interesting on both these app and databases, you'll notice that there's some apps that are relatively quick wins to move to Paas, right? Some are going to take more effort, but it allows you to get some quick experience, move down the learning curve, show some quick wins internally to modernize these apps to Paas and containers. Next is an example of the level of detail you get from the report. So here you can see the actual lines of code that need to be changed. This was to make a DLL change to the application. We also identify the code block and file path. We provide you with recommendation as to what you need to do. In this particular case, for about 40% of these recommendations, we actually provide royalty-free sample code that you can take a look at. Your developers can use it. They may decide they want to write something different. And then we estimate that this would take about an hour's worth of effort to make these code changes and then also to test them. So that's how we can, because we know the detail down to the line of code of how much effort of what you need to change, we can put together very detailed sizing estimates. Our estimates have also been reviewed by our good friends over at Microsoft, and they, find that we catch everything that needs to be caught for the change, and they think that our recommendations and estimates are accurate. So it's nice to know that we're getting sort of an unofficial blessing from our friends there. And this is what you can get. So once you've got sort of the detailed technical assessment, you can then start to, partnering with Tallan, start to prioritize, which applications you want to move and put together a detailed plan for those, and then actually start the execution of that. The key is now you've got kind of X-ray vision into your application and databases. So you know exactly what changes need to be made to go to different scenarios, whether you're thinking about going to VMs, containers, app services, or databases to SQL MI or SQL Azure, SQL VMs. And you can make a very informed decision and put together a strategy. And then Tallan can help you every step of the way through that journey and put together the plan. And you may find that some of the apps you decide to move to containers, some to Paas, some to VMs, or you may decide everything's going to go to a certain approach, whether it's Paas or containers, and obviously that's going to depend on your internal requirements. But that's a quick overview of the tool and how it can be used literally in minutes to give you detailed insights into your portfolio. Ryan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. So yeah, before we close and wrap up here, there's a couple polls final polls we're going to post. So the first one is, what is the size of your application portfolio? And have you assessed your your application portfolios for cloud readiness? So I'll give everyone a second to answer those, and then we'll go into closing and questions. All right. So it looks like we have a handful of people that already have assessed. some that only have done some apps, which is very common, and some that haven't at all. So, and then when we're looking at the portfolio sizes, some of you with larger portfolios, 50 to 100, and then between 1 to 50 for the rest of you. So great, thank you for sharing that information. So just to kind of wrap everything up, wanted to talk a little bit about Tallan and UnifyCloud's app portfolio assessment. So at a very high level, that chart that Mark went over, the assess, prioritize, plan, and execute, this is what this is trying to accomplish. And on the assessment part up front, the UnifyCloud tool is involved heavily to gather all that data and those great insights that Mark showed you through the screenshots that he took. And then kind of the way we approach it afterwards is that Tallan helps you kind of digest and analyze that data and create a prioritization of your apps. So if you have 25 apps, you might not want to try and move them all at once, but you could at least create a prioritization and then a plan and a roadmap of how you want to get those over there and the timeline around those. So that's really what this application portfolio assessment is trying to accomplish. And we've done it a variety of different ways. And some people just want to start with one app, see how the tool works, do some analysis, and then move from there, similar to some of the customers that I shared earlier. And other people want to take a subset of their apps and run it through the tool and see how it works. So there's multiple ways to work with us on this. We've done it in workshop format. We could do it just more like one-on-one. So definitely open to conversations around this and any questions you guys have on the offering. And you'll be getting some follow-up information with more details on this offering and how we could kind of help you. My contact information is down there if anyone wants to email me. And then without further ado, I will open it up to any questions. And I'm actually going to go back in here and see if there was any while we were presenting. Are we supposed to be seeing something right now? That's not the best question. I hope that did get resolved. And then Anad said, will you be sharing the recording? Yes, the recording will be going out probably either today or tomorrow once we get that buttoned up. And then we have another one. How long would we expect one of these assessments to take? So that's a good question, and it really depends. I'll give the classic consultant answer. So it depends on the amount of apps that you want to look at. If it's one app with the power of the UnifyCloud tool, we could probably do that in a couple days workshop, like 1 to 3 days. If it's a large portfolio of applications, you're probably looking at a much bigger effort. And we'd scope all that out beforehand. So I'll give it a second if anyone else has any additional questions, but just know that everything will be getting sent out, the offer, the recording, and if anyone has any needs or questions following the webinar, just don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Mark. So I'll give it a couple seconds here for additional questions, and then we're going to close out.
Ryan, looks like we got another question.
Yeah, Anad, are there any links to explain how to learn the tool and self-help paced training material? Mark, I think that's for more of a question for you in terms of the UnifyCloud tool. I think there's information on your website, but if you want to point.
So the tools are called. So first of all, if it's okay with you, Ryan, I can provide you a link or two that you could send out as part of the follow-up with also the link to the recording, so we can.
Yeah.
We'll certainly get some links out to everybody who attended and registered. You can also go to our website, either unifycloud.com or cloudatlasinc.com. Cloud Atlas Inc. is just a little closer to what the tools are and what they do. You can also go to Vimeo and type in Cloud Atlas, and you'll see collection of recordings there as well that describe the tool. And what we do is we give you sort of an overview, and then we kind of drill down into each of the phases. One of the key points is, because understandably people sometimes get concerned when we talk about scanning source code, right? And how does that work? So the good news is you stay in control through the whole process. There's a lightweight client you can download. It'll run on anything, a PC, and that quickly scans the code, and then that produces an XML file, which is human readable. And when you go through the XML file, you'll see it's just metadata about the application, where there's no IP, no source code, no secrets, nothing like that. And so you can take your time, review the XML data, and then once you're comfortable with it, you can also mask if there's like a server name or something you want to mask, you can mask that. And then once it's ready, you can provide it to Tallan, and they'll upload it, and you'll get a detailed report within a few minutes. Scanning the apps is very fast. Typically, if it's 1 million lines of code, we can scan it in about 15 minutes. So it goes pretty quickly.
Awesome. It looks like you had a couple more questions pop in here. So there was one around
great question. Let's see.
Around pricing, and then Cloud Recon versus CloudPilot. So the pricing question, I don't know if you're comfortable answering that with a NDA or whatever it may be, but we could certainly discuss that. But Mark, if you're comfortable sharing.
Yes, I think Anand, we'd love to maybe have a follow-up, but essentially it's priced per application is kind of how it's priced, and then you get unlimited scans for a period of time, because we found that you typically want to run it in sprints as you make changes, and then you just scan it to make sure that you fix what you fixed and you didn't introduce any new uncertainties, and we can set up more detail. So far, there's a tool called Cloud Recon. Cloud Recon is really designed for assessing your infrastructure, so sizing of VMs, identifying dependencies, that sort of thing. It typically works off of data that you could get from the Map Toolkit or Azure Migrate, SCOM. There are about 15, Landsweeper, there are about 15 different tools that we can pull data from and put together a detailed economic analysis and sizing analysis to go to Azure. That's more at an infrastructure level. CloudPilot goes from 30,000 foot infrastructure level down to about 3 feet, where you're using a microscope to look at the app, you're scanning the source code, and you're getting down to the line of code of what changes need to be made. So hopefully that helps explain the difference. So one's kind of an infrastructure level view, like if you're thinking about moving a data center. The other is going down to the apps and databases that you actually want to move and modernize.
They just keep coming in.
That's great. Wow. So great question on, I'll do programming languages first. So right now the CloudPilot tool supports all .NET, so going way back to the earliest .NET, all versions of Java and PHP. And so hopefully we found in our experience that's most of the languages used in IT departments, but I guess let us know if you've got additional languages you'd like to have supported. And then question, any scenarios in which this tool may not perform as expected? We haven't run into that. I mean, we've scanned some really large legacy applications. I mean, 2 million plus lines of code, 20-year-old apps, and it's worked fine. On the data side, I probably want to bring my CTO in terms of schema and that sort of thing. But essentially, any sort of structured data, we can certainly take a look at. I'm not technical enough to be able to comment on the schema-less data, Delaney, but happy to follow up with email, and we can always set up a conversation if you want to set up some more time.
I think you covered.
John did reference there is an offer through the Visual Studio subscription license benefit. So we've partnered with Microsoft. So if you're a Visual Studio, you can get access to a couple of licenses for CloudPilot. So that's available to you, and obviously we can through Tallan as well. You can access those. Great question. Oh, VB6. VB6 may be a little bit of a challenge, and we've actually run across Foxbase, Fox Pro, Power Builder apps. So that's going to be more of a challenge. June, I'd rather kind of table that for a conversation with our CTO and just bring him in. I know we can do very early versions of .NET. And then let's see, Cast. So a question about Cast. So Cast is a great tool as well for assessing your portfolio. We partner with them. I hope they won't mind my speaking about their tool. The way I think about the Cast tool is it's a great way to scan your code for code health and code quality, and also potential unlicensed code that your developers may have grabbed from, say, GitHub and put into the application. So it's a great tool for that. Tallan could also work with Cast and help you assess your portfolio. So we both do static code analysis, both UnifyCloud and Cast, but for different purposes. They do it primarily for health and quality of code, licensing, potential licensing issues in your code. What we're doing is we're looking at your code and to identify exactly what changes you would need to be able to run in Azure under different scenarios, containers, app services, and VMs. But we don't do the things that they do, which is like tell you if you've got poor code quality or you're vulnerable to cross-site scripting or something like that. We're focused just on assessing your application for modernization to Azure.
Yep. And looks like there's one other one. Is there restriction on the type of applications? So desktop, mobile, web?
Not really, no. I mean, it goes back more to the languages. So, for example, if you had a Xamarin app or something like that, we wouldn't be able to help you with scanning that. But as long as it's .NET, Java, JavaScript, or PHP, then there's no limitation.
Awesome. All right,
Great.
last call for questions. Yeah, we never get this many questions on webinars. This is great. All right. Well, without further ado, I'll close it up, and we will be sending out some information. Mark, I'll make sure that the UnifyCloud, the information on the tool and where people can learn more is included in our follow-up email. And again, anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and set up time with Tallan and UnifyCloud to discuss more. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.